Hey, what's going on YouTube? It's Guru Joe, and welcome to another episode of the Warriors Code. If you haven't been here before, aside from just doing martial arts curriculum videos and hot takes on all that, I do a weekly segment on philosophy or whatever's on my mind. Sometimes it's a question somebody has posed to me to answer, either in class or elsewhere or here online. And this week, I came up with the topic of what I call intellectual curiosity. And to me, intellect is something to be prized, to be sought after, to develop. Your brain is like any other muscle in your body. We take care of things with diet and exercise. We try to live in a way where we're not damaging ourselves every day, right? We don't eat junk food at every meal. It's the same thing with your brain. You don't want to just flood it with junk food and have nothing to sustain yourself on. And just like when you see a fit person and you're like, oh, wow, that person is 50 years old and they're still running half marathons or whatever the benchmark may be, we should be equally impressed. And in truth, we are when we see somebody who carries their intelligence in such a way that it floods the room. It's not somebody that belittles you or berates you with it, but you can just tell. Have you ever been in the room where you felt like that person walked in, sort of captivated everybody because they were the smartest person in the room, and you couldn't turn away from the conversation because it was so engaging? Or maybe you've had somebody, a colleague at work that you work with, who is like that. They're well read, they're informed, and not only are they informed, but they can articulate things clearly. And I think one of the hallmarks of that is a healthy amount of skepticism. Rather than what's popular today online seems to be uh, jumping to conclusions, or worse, sort of a permanent sense of outrage. And the issue with outrage is that it's a normal emotion. And when we talk about intelligence, we can't talk about, like I already talked about physicality, we shouldn't ignore the rest of the human body behind it. Um, and our conscious mind also includes the emotions behind it. And people, oh, don't make a decision based on emotion. Well, yeah, that is impossible. Every decision, from what you choose to have for breakfast to where you work to who you date and partner with, every decision has a background driver that is based on a wide spectrum of emotions. And it's how we manage our emotional mind with our logical mind that keeps things on an even keel, keeps us moving in the direction that we want to go in life. And unfortunately, social media has sort of figured out, and to a large degree, our news media too, that outrage and hate and that rage engagement, that is what drives clicks, right? And we think about the media and social media as engines of profit, as businesses. They have to do something to keep the clicks coming in. And it is totally designed to just feed you an algorithm of rage so that you don't get off of it. We know that that sensation of rage gives us a little dopamine hit in the brain. It feels good. The same feeling we have after a strenuous workout, like you finish a 3 mile jog, but instead of a jog, it's click click click. It's a rapid fire hit. And what do? We go to the post. We look at what we're enraged about. We get so fed up and angry. It's like, oh my god, and then tick, we just scroll a screen, and it's on to the next one. And some of us, we call it doom scrolling, when you're looking for that negativity. But honestly, you don't have to look for it at all. It is literally fed to you, right? You could have a Reddit feed of nothing but puppies and what we call food porn and everything, but you're still gonna run into like horrific news stories or anecdotal videos of people getting run over by cars or whatever it is, and then things with a political bent that are totally slanted and out of context. And I think that is by design. When we are enraged and there's no other intellectual curiosity behind it, more or less our curiosity, essentially, it stops right there. It stops at the moment of rage. And so we hold on to that rage, we get the dopamine hit, click, we're on to the next one. We never move through the normal process of emotions, which is like when you make a decision. Like if you were to go buy a brand new car, and imagine you're 16 years old, you've never bought a car before, and you're super hyped. Um, you might not be thinking logically about the price of the car, the maintenance the car needs, the shape and wear and tear that it's in, the mileage on the car, all those number of factors. Your excitement may overwhelm you. In fact, that's how it was when I first went and got my first car. And I remember I looked at a couple, probably lemons, but I was excited about them because it was the model of the car I wanted. It was the first one I looked at, right? And no negotiating. I just told the guy outright, like, oh, let's do it. Luckily, my dad was there and was like, hey, hold on a minute. Let's take a day, think about it overnight, come back, and we'll make an informed decision. Because that process of delay gives you time to process your emotions, free from distractions, and sort of separate the emotions from the logical portion of the argument. Because is it okay to be excited about buying a car? 100%, absolutely. But it shouldn't override all the pragmatic things that also go in with that responsibility, that burden. Oh man, I want this car. Oh, the loan payment on it is $700 a month, or let's make it even bigger, $1,500 a month. One of my guys at the MMA club, he's a great gentleman, good friend of mine. He runs the Ferrari dealership in town, and some of the payments there will balloon past $18,000 a month. So some people might make such a rapid decision, they get underwater in debt that they can't afford to pay back off. And that is when our emotions drive us past our intellect rather than working in tandem. Man, I'm excited about this car. Oh, the fear in me, though, gives me a little hesitancy. The skepticism in me is like, can I afford that? Let me take a pause and think about it. Oh, yes, I can. All right, I'm going to go tomorrow. I'm going to be excited about picking up this purchase or whatever it is. We have to cultivate our mind of skepticism and intellectual curiosity the same way online. You know, I'm sure you guys probably found this channel watching my MMA videos that I put up. I'm sure you've seen horrific MMA out there, and you're like, oh no, that's not it, right? You make an informed decision about that, because unfortunately, in the world there are bad people, there are bad actors, there are people that they have an agenda and they have a design. Like, we know there's con men out there, right? You know, there's people out there that want to separate you from your money and take advantage of you. And a healthy dose of intellectual curiosity goes a long way to preventing people from having those opportunities. Because when you're enraged, if we go back to that, because that's kind of the theme I want to touch on, people can manipulate you. They can manipulate you with your own anger, and then they can kind of direct it, hey, be angry at this, regardless if it is true or not. Because the anger in itself, just like my car example, that is not a negative emotion. It is totally normal and natural to be angry and be enraged about things, and there are plenty of things that we should be enraged about. But if you don't know why, or you don't have a direction for that anger, or someone has worse, they have misled you to be angry about something that really doesn't impact you, you shouldn't be angry in the first place about, you're being taken advantage of. And there's a great quote by the philosopher Voltaire, and what he said, the people that can make you believe in absurdities can make you commit atrocities. And it's so true, because the absurdities is the falsehood, it's the lie, it's the fake part. And people who can get so worked up about this messaging and propaganda that they'll be moved by it, moved into action, whether it's with your vote to vote against your interests, or with it's to join the wrong side of a protest, or to burn some books that somebody thinks should be banned. I mean, who's ever been on the right side of history burning a book? Ever. Right? Like Inasano recently told me a story that in the Philippines, they used to have their own alphabet. They still have their own alphabet. Let me correct myself. And when the Spanish arrived, the letters, were pictorial. They were glyphic letters. And so the Spanish said, oh, that's satanic writing. And they burned all the books, burned anything with writing, just because it wasn't the characters that we use. And so it's an absurdity that moves people towards atrocities. And there's a really good book on this to sort of separate emotions from fact and how to find sources, because that's the next thing we need to do is, what is the remedy for the situation? It's okay to be outraged, but not if there's no resolution for it. Or if you just stop at your outrage right there, there's no other thought process behind it. There's a really good book on this. It's very short. It's by a guy named Hans Rosling. He gave some TED Talks probably about a decade ago. I think he's passed away. But he had a book called Finding Factfulness, or maybe it's just called Factfulness. And it's just about how the media manipulates you, how advertising manipulates you. It gets us to otherize people, to sort of label other people as enemies when we're all part of the same community and humanity. And just how to sift that out so you're better educated. And sometimes, well, I don't want to put in work to be educated. Well, don't you want to put in work to prevent people from taking advantage of you in the future? Like, if you got conned once, wouldn't you like to insulate yourself and protect yourself to make sure it doesn't happen again? I mean, that's my take on it. But one of the examples from the book is sort of this: they weaponize things in a couple different ways. One is a distraction, right? An absurd lie that's so false, it's so big, you kind of want to believe it because you're like, well, man, I don't lie in my daily life, and nobody would tell a lie like that. It's so outrageous. Like, how could you possibly believe it? So there's got to be like an air of truth to it, and I'll get to an example here in a second. Another thing they do is they will manipulate numbers in a way where there's no context. Like, what if I said the murder rate in Portland went up 75% this year? Look out, everybody. And you hear that, you read it, and you're like, oh my God, is it even safe to go outside? And what are the police doing? And think of all the thoughts that can run through your head just from that phrase. But what if you dig a little deeper and you source where that information comes from, and you find out, well, God, this is a fake example. I don't know the crime data. I'm just saying it. Well, last year there was one murder in my metropolitan area. Okay, well, a 70% increase, that's a big uptick. That's still not two whole people, right? So they can give you numbers to bring out your rage, but what is the context behind it? And we see this with AI now too, right? Like, we see totally doctored videos that look real that are absolutely 100% fake. And I'm sure you've encountered pictures and images like I have of people with 7 fingers. And we can sometimes spot them. And honestly, I've been tricked by a few. Friends have sent me stuff. I've seen something online, and it took me quite a few minutes to get through and be like, oh, well, this is AI, And then even when people pointed it out, I'm like, are they sure? It looks pretty damn real to me, right? So this era we live in, more information is at our fingertips than ever before. But it's also, there's more work to be done on our part. And this goes back to what I started with, intellectual curiosity. We need to be curious in such a way that we want to get to the gold standard of information and not just be satisfied with the first thing that is presented to us. And honestly, I think people that want to manipulate you, they count on this. They count on you being too uninformed and too distracted and not willing to do your homework, not being curious enough to look through that lens of skepticism and find out what the sources are. And there are validity in sources. Sometimes people cast aside like Fox News or whatever their favorite media outlet is, but it really comes down to the source in that moment. I can watch Fox News or read, some online article from it, and even having a totally liberal viewpoint, I can sift through the bias and see things in there. Oh, that's true. Oh, and here's the source for it. And then sometimes you pull up a story and it's like, oh, well, Fox News is linking to their own publication, the New York Post, and it's a circular source. And when you try to find out what the origin of the story is, there's nothing behind it. It's just circular logic. But sometimes, like, they might cite a source of like the judiciary, like what was said in court. Here's a court document. They might cite Congress. Here's the congressional record from Congress. This is what was said on the House floor. This is the voting record. So there are certain things that when you narrow down to the source, you should be able to remove the bias from it, right? Like somebody posted something on Reuters. Oh, it was about what we're going to talk about. It was, speaking of outrage, you may have heard this story in the last week. The press secretary went on from the White House, and she said that we were giving 50 to 100 million from U.S. aid to Gaza purely for condoms, and that Hamas had taken the condoms and turned them into bombs. And now, if you heard that and you're reticent to believe it, you might immediately think to be just completely outraged, and how can they do this, and they're taking, right? It's also emotional because it's not just the outrage of waste and fraud and abuse. It is also, that's my money, that's my taxpayer dollars that are going that direction, right? And so all of a sudden you have all this rage, but you don't have any resolution for yourself, or worse, you believe that the resolution offered is the true thing based on the absurdity. Because 100 million condoms. So just before we get any further to debunking that story, news outlets have come out, right? And who are they sourcing? They're sourcing U.S. aid themselves and congressional packages that have gone through Congress. And we do provide condoms for other countries. Why? Why do we do that? That's important. And it is because it limits the spread of HIV and AIDS, because we don't want a planet riddled with an AIDS epidemic, because that is going to affect our safety and security as well. It's going to affect the United States with people traveling here, with Americans traveling elsewhere, right? And so it's also just out of goodwill. And if you don't like a line item and don't approve of it, then get on the phone to Congress. There's a Republican majority right now. If they want to trim that from U.S. aid, I'm sure they would. But that's the constitutional way to get it done, not to just wipe out the entire agency. Now let's examine those actual costs, right? Let's say it's $50 million, okay? $50 million on condoms. Again, it's not true. The news has said it's not true. USA Aid has said it's not true. Sources in government have said that's not true. And the other side, Elon Musk, who originally made the claim, has provided no evidence whatsoever. Memes online are not evidence, right? That's not a sourced document. I can make a meme right now and write whatever I want on it. And just because I have a big megaphone doesn't mean you should give me any more authority in believing me. You should do your due diligence and look it up. So U.S. Aid pays, when they buy a box of condoms, they pay. This is only because the guy got interviewed, the head of USA, that I know this. They pay about a nickel per box, and if it was $50 million that was spent, that would mean 50 billion condoms were shipped to Gaza. So where are they? 50 billion? That's not an unnoticeable amount. Okay, so now we start to see the absurdity unravel, and we can sort of see it for what it is. And just to sort of firm that up a little bit, Israel itself, they are in charge of oversight for all the aid that we deliver to Gaza. So the U.S. comes along and says, hey, we want to deliver food, medical supplies, doctors, whatever it is to Gaza. We go through Israel because they're our ally and our partner in the region. And so they also keep track of all aid that flows into Gaza, and they are saying it's not true that there's not 50 billion condoms paid for by the U.S. Hamas is not using them as bombs. It was just made up. That's an absurdity right there. And what the money was for, it actually was $100 million. And it was for 2 operational hospitals delivering medical supplies and medical care to people in need, because I can say without a blink that Hamas is a terrorist organization. They've been highly radicalized through years of conflict, and they're an extremist group that committed a terrorist attack on October 7th. But the people of Palestine are not all bad. There are people everywhere that get caught up in political regimes that don't necessarily agree with it or back it or whatever. And isn't this pro-life movement, isn't life supposed to be worth something, right? So what happens is we replace our care and our empathy for our fellow human beings with this absurdity. And then it enables us to be like, oh yeah, cut all U.S. aid, cut all care to God, and, wipe Gaza off the map. We need to clean it out. We need to build new beachfront condos, and those people need to never come back. It's pretty absurd. It's pretty absurd. Imagine someone coming into your home state, destroying all your buildings and infrastructure, all your livelihood, your friends and neighbors, your family, people dying in the process, reducing it to rubble, and then telling everyone they never want you to come back. You can never live there again, and you're not welcome in your home country. Right? It's pretty absurd. Pretty absurd. So we have to look with a better lens of skepticism at what's going on. And you can filter it on both sides. I think if you're skeptical on either side, you're less apt to get into sort of an echo chamber where you'll believe, anything. It just goes back to the con man idea that I don't want to be manipulated by others. I want to have a layer of protection. And having this healthy sense of curiosity and skepticism is going to afford that, so that I'm less likely to be taken advantage of in the future. But also, when we read through sources, we need to be able to go beyond the memes, what we see online that instantly triggers a sense of agreement within our emotions, and actually figure out what is going on. Because that's the only way we can then move forward past our emotions and have a deeper impact on the world around us, right? Then you're not just operating in a sense of rage. Your rage has to move you towards a sense of resolution, right? Your rage is designed to get you to take action, right? If I think of my fighters at the MMA club, right? A healthy amount of aggression, is necessary to get in the ring. You have to have some aggression. So behind that, sometimes people they'll whip up some internal anger. They'll think about some past memory when maybe they were bullied or whatever, and they'll give themselves like a purpose, or they'll flash back to a time where they were in the military and service fighting for their lives, and they will put that into the ring because it's the fire that drives them. It's like fuel, and it gives them that direct purpose and that energy to take charge of the moment with some authority and go do the job. And then after the fight, it's what do I need to work on if somebody lost, and what do I need to work on if I won, and hey, let's celebrate a little bit. But the anger moment has passed, right? They're not fuming about the fight, especially if you won, right? You're celebrating. Usually when you lost, if somebody loses, they don't have anger either. Sometimes they're embarrassed, or their pride's a little hurt. But before, when they were like, oh, I'm going to take him out, I'm going to knock his face off, that energy has been used up. And that's a healthy mode of anger. I'm angry about this, I take action on it, I get the task done, and now it is resolved, right? But unresolved anger it's like a fire that just goes unchecked. Light a fire in your backyard. Oh, pretty soon the yard's on fire. Then the fence, now the house. There's no purpose to it. It's just purely destructive. So we have to pause in our moments of rage, and it's kind of a trigger for me. So what I do is, anytime I'm outraged by a post or a meme or a news story, whatever it is, that is my cue to be like, oh, I need to look more into this. Because it can be on both sides of the coin. Like a lot of politicians take money and donations, and it's important to know, like, were those appropriate? There was some local news story here. I won't bore you with who the statesman was, but some agitator online was like, they're corrupt, they're using government funds for personal use, and they actually caused this whole investigation. And then it came out that this person had taken their now I want to say their campaign staff, but just their regular staff, after achieving the position, right, to a company appreciation dinner. It was an office party, like a normal functioning thing. And then this person had also left their partner, their spouse, use their parking space at work. And that was it. But you have people online responding to it in their rage, and it caught me for a minute too, that were like, oh yeah, there's just another corrupt politician, and we've got to get him out of there. Um, when in fact it was highly mundane. And I think about these Gaza condom bombs. I mean, it's so funny to like even say that. And then looking into that, you know, you start to see the details, and the details are very mundane. So what's the problem with it? There is a history of people whipping up outrage under the guise of we've got to attack the corruption, right? Got to attack the corruption. But now we see there's no proof of the corruption. And so they're using that as their smokescreen, as their cover to destroy this agency that does a lot of humanitarian good in the world, that is a lot of U.S. soft power. It's power that's not necessarily militarized, but it builds relationships, it builds trade, it limits, like we already talked about, the spread of disease, it promotes health, it guards against famine in the world. It's also one of our pandemic sensors that when disease is spreading, we're alerted to it first because we have these feelers out. And the more that America is out there, it leaves less space for countries like China and Russia to move in. Because when we isolate ourselves, who's going to take over aid? China has already stepped up and said they're going to do it. So now that is the voice that is cooperating and building these just collaborations with other countries. They're taking our place, and that just reduces our influence around the globe. And then let's go back to the emotional topic, and then I'll finish this up. I didn't mean to get so long-winded, but I usually do. The outrage is right. Wasteful spending, waste, fraud, and abuse. I'm mad at that because I don't cheat anybody, and I don't want to get cheated. And then also it's my money, right? It's our tax dollars. We should be furious about it. Urgh. Okay? The agency's cut. They went from about 2,500 people down to, I think the staff at the end of the week was just under 300. And, you know, Musk is out there saying he's going to save billions. When is it coming back to us? When does that happen? Autocrats around the world, look at Javier Milei in Argentina. He said the national public radio there was corrupt, made an extreme example like these Gaza condom bombs, axed it, said it was state-run media, then actually launched his own state-run media. There's a lot of historical examples. Look at Brexit in the UK. If you look now at the numbers, almost every Brit would vote to stay, but they didn't before. And it's for the same reasons. They were outraged in their anger. Somebody else outwardly waste, fraud, and abuse, right? So there's this otherizing, there's an external enemy, this external threat. And there's all this waste, fraud, and abuse and corruption, which we know there is, and we're mad about that in Congress because we feel like whether it's Parliament or Congress here, like we can't do anything about it. We're sort of powerless. So when we get the opportunity, when somebody says there's corruption, right, we all get on board and we want to attack the corrupt thing. So now they sometimes use that as an excuse because they know you're so tired and exhausted and enraged that you're just going to go along with it. So in Brexit, right, they said that it was immigrants, they were harming the British, that UK need to leave the EU, and that there was all this money going to foreign aid organizations like the UN and the EU as a whole. That I can't remember the amount. I want to say it was $200 or $300 billion a year. It might have been even more insane than that. They might have claimed it was $200 billion a month. But what happens when they leave Brexit? Not a damn thing. Nothing that benefited the British people, right? Nothing that benefited England itself, right? There was no money. That none of that came back to the citizenry. What happened is the economy contracted. They lost economic opportunity, not gained. Immigrants were stalled from coming into the country because they're no longer part of the EU. So that sort of global passport no longer had fast access, and it was part of the deal. They pushed them out. So we saw a lot of businesses struggle during that time. It was right before COVID. And now the UK, the citizens there themselves, they still have a much harder time traveling if they own property in neighboring countries like Spain or Portugal. It's harder for them to get there, to even keep their property. And it's kind of like in the U.S., Vancouver and Montreal. They're just a short drive away to Canada. Well, people were working across the border, and a lot of that traffic stopped or became way more encumbered. And so that's always the tale, right? There's waste, fraud, and abuse. We got to do something about it. It's this external threat. It's these enemies over there, and we got to get you outraged about it. And when we take care of this on the chopping block, it's going to come back to you where it rightfully belongs. But maybe you in the comments, as I wrap this up, when does it happen? And we don't have to look back. We're not talking history, right? Javier Milei just took office within the last year, and he has doubled the level of national poverty, right? He has brought austerity. So what are the benefits? What is going to be the benefit for destroying U.S. aid? And if you haven't been paying attention, the National Labor Board, that's out because they said the very qualified black woman who worked at the agency was a DEI hire, so she had to go. But nobody got hired in their replacement. So now that's affecting like union expansion. In fact, there was a union deal that went through at Amazon before the election. And now Amazon's saying they don't have to honor it because there's no longer an enforcement mechanism because the NRLB is down. The Consumer Protection Bureau, they shuttered that. The Consumer Protection Bureau, consumer protection is in the name. That was a benefit to us. That is what has limited overdraft fees on bank accounts, different types of predatory credit reporting, credit card scams in general. If you were ever defrauded, and your account was hacked, it made it easier when you went to the bank and they'd be like, oh yeah, that's not your fault. We'll take care of that right away. And it's happened to me. It's happened to my wife. Pretty much everybody I know. You have that money quickly reversed. That was part of that organization because it was enacted in 2008 with the hedge fund crisis. That's gone. So where are the savings going to be passed on to us? Are we getting a reduction in taxes? Where is the benefit to the American people? And so if you can just move past your outrage for a minute and you can do a little bit of research and see what's going on here and there, I think then you'll have a healthy level of alarm, at least to raise questions. Is it going to affect me as a small business owner that the NRLB isn't functional? It can affect the economy. I want people to have a union to join and a strong job to go to, but I'm not personally impacted by it. So it requires a little bit of focus and attention from me to see what people are going through. Just like Medicare and Medicaid, that there might be cuts made to that. Doesn't affect me directly, but I have clients, friends, family on Medicare or Medicaid, so it's going to impact all of us. I'm not an immigrant myself, but I have students and clients and friends and family that do. And I don't want to get too much into that. Plenty of topics for other videos. But the point of today was intellectual curiosity paired with being a healthy skeptic. Not so skeptical you can't find the answers, right? Outrage is healthy, but it needs a resolution, right? But we have to move past. We can't let people give us such absurdities that they convince us to commit atrocities, as Voltaire said. And then I think that book recommendation I made, Finding Factfulness, that is an awesome book, Hans Rosling. If you don't want to read the book, you should read more. I'm going to get into that. There's a TED Talk by him that touches on a lot of it, and it's well worth your time. I'm sure it's free on YouTube. Maybe I'll try to link it in the description. And then watch out for these weaponized distractions. We talked about absurdities, and I talked a little bit about feeling exhausted in your rage, and that's where they want you. Once you start looking at the answers, things can be a little scary what's going on in the world, but honestly, it's less stressful than perpetual outrage because it gives you a clear head for which to see things clearly and move forward. It's like if I told you, your house was on fire and it's flooded and there's just been an earthquake, but only one of those are true. On your way home, you're freaking out. But then if you arrive and you see that only one of those things is happening or none of them at all and it was just a lie, you feel a lot better. And so just getting sound information to stand on. And so work on finding legitimate, unbiased sources. But if you're reading articles, they usually will link to all their sources. And so it's an extra click through, but you can find out and then you can, hey, do I trust this person? What is their credibility? What is their track record? Trust but verify. And then you can sort of start to see behind the scenes. And it happens on both sides of the political aisle, because most of our media is corporate owned by billionaires, and they all have a certain sort of outrage agenda. And even online, like there's no social media, whether it's Reddit or Blue Sky, that is free from the rage bait algorithm. So you are the one who shoulders that responsibility. And to make this community, and I call humanity our community, to make humanity and society work, we have to be well-informed citizens, and we have to shoulder some of the responsibility, so we're not just A, waiting for it to be handed to us, or B, accusing people in our outrage for things we perceive we didn't get and want, all that stuff. But intellectual curiosity, my friends. All right, have a great weekend. Enjoy the Super Bowl. Hopefully I get this posted before then. Warriors out.